Background and education. John Quincy Adams was born into a family with a strong political legacy. He was the eldest son of John Adams, who later became the second president of the United States, and Abigail Adams, an intelligent and influential woman who played a significant role in shaping his thoughts and career. From an early age, Adams was immersed in the world of politics and diplomacy as his father actively participated in the movement for American independence. Adams's childhood unfolded against the backdrop of the American Revolution. As a young boy, he witnessed key moments in U.S. history, from the Declaration of Independence to the fierce struggles for freedom from British rule. Unlike most children of his time, Adams did not have a typical upbringing. Instead, he frequently traveled with his parents on diplomatic missions, gaining first-hand exposure to international affairs. In 1778, at just 10 years old, Adams accompanied his father to Europe, where he was introduced to the world of diplomacy. While living abroad, he studied at prestigious schools in Paris, Amsterdam, and Leiden, Netherlands. From an early age, he demonstrated an exceptional talent for languages, quickly mastering French, Dutch, and later German, Spanish, and Italian. Beyond his linguistic abilities, Adams had a sharp analytical mind and a deep understanding of politics. During his time in Russia, where he served as a personal secretary to the U.S. ambassador, he observed European politics and learned from some of the era's most influential statesmen. This invaluable experience helped shape his keen diplomatic instincts in the years to come. Upon returning to the United States, Adams enrolled at Harvard University, one of the most prestigious institutions of the time. He graduated in 1787 with outstanding academic achievements and pursued a career in law. However, rather than practicing law for long, he quickly transitioned into politics, following in the footsteps of his father. His early education and international experiences provided John Quincy Adams with a strong intellectual foundation and a global perspective. He was not only a statesman, but also a scholar and thinker, far ahead of his time. The challenges of his youth forged a determined and insightful leader, well prepared to take on the great responsibilities that awaited him. Diplomatic career. John Quincy Adams is widely regarded as one of the most accomplished diplomats in U.S. history. His diplomatic career began at an early age and spanned several decades, shaping America's foreign policy in the 19th century through a series of significant achievements. From a young age, Adams was exposed to diplomacy while accompanying his father on missions to Europe. His years in France, the Netherlands, England, and Russia gave him deep insights into international politics. This experience proved invaluable when he embarked on his own political career, quickly earning key assignments on the world stage. In 1794, at just 27 years old, President George Washington appointed Adams as the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands. This was a crucial diplomatic post at the time, as the Netherlands was a major financial center in Europe. While there, Adams skillfully negotiated to strengthen U.S.-Dutch relations and secure much-needed financial support for the young American nation. In 1797, he was reassigned as ambassador to Prussia, modern-day Germany, under his father, President John Adams. During his tenure, he successfully negotiated a trade treaty that fostered economic ties between the two nations. However, his diplomatic career was temporarily interrupted in 1801 when Thomas Jefferson took office, as political differences between the two parties led to his recall. Adams returned to diplomacy in 1809 when President James Madison appointed him ambassador to Russia. This was a critical position, given that Europe was engulfed in the Napoleonic Wars. In Russia, Adams built a strong relationship with Tsar Alexander I, who was sympathetic to the United States. He even attempted to persuade Russia to mediate peace talks between the U.S. and Britain during the War of 1812. In 1814, Adams was sent to Belgium as the lead negotiator for the United States in the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war between the U.S. and Britain. Despite challenging circumstances, Adams and his team secured a favorable agreement, preserving U.S. territory and sovereignty. This was considered one of his greatest diplomatic successes. Following the Treaty of Ghent, Adams was appointed U.S. ambassador to Britain, where he worked to ease lingering tensions after the war. He played a key role in negotiating trade agreements and border settlements, laying the groundwork for improved Anglo-American relations in the years to come. The pinnacle of Adams' diplomatic career came in 1817 when President James Monroe appointed him as U.S. Secretary of State. In this role, he was the chief architect of the Monroe Doctrine, a landmark foreign policy statement that warned European powers against interfering in the affairs of the Americas. This doctrine not only safeguarded the newly independent Latin American nations, but also shaped U.S. foreign policy for decades. Adams also played a decisive role in negotiating the Adams-Oens Treaty with Spain in 1819, which secured Florida for the United States and established the western border with Spanish territories. This was a major achievement, expanding U.S. territory while ensuring stability in the southern region. With his strategic vision and masterful negotiation skills, John Quincy Adams left a lasting legacy in American diplomacy. He not only strengthened the U.S. position on the global stage, but also laid the foundation for key foreign policy principles that would guide the nation for generations to come. President of the United States John Quincy Adams became the 6th President of the United States in 1825 after one of the most controversial elections in American history. The 1824 race featured 4 major candidates: Adams, Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, and William Crawford. Although Jackson won the most popular votes, none of the candidates secured enough electoral votes to claim victory. As required by the 12th Amendment, the election was decided by the House of Representatives. Henry Clay, who held significant influence in the House, backed Adams, helping him defeat Jackson. This led to accusations of a corrupt bargain, with Jackson and his supporters claiming that Adams had secretly promised Clay the position of Secretary of State in exchange for his support. An ambitious agenda. Upon taking office, Adams proposed an ambitious agenda to promote national development. He believed the federal government should play an active role in expanding infrastructure, strengthening the economy, and improving education. Some of his key proposals included infrastructure development. Adams advocated for the construction of roads, canals, and transportation networks to connect different regions, boost trade, and encourage migration. He supported projects like the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and the Erie Canal system. Scientific and educational institutions. He sought to establish a national public school system, expand research facilities, create a national academy, and develop a national observatory. Peaceful and cooperative foreign policy. Adams continued to uphold the Monroe Doctrine, promote trade relations, and avoid unnecessary conflicts with European nations. Political obstacles. Despite his grand vision, Adams faced fierce opposition from the Democratic Party, led by Andrew Jackson. Many of Jackson's supporters viewed Adams as an illegitimate president and worked to block his agenda at every turn. With Congress controlled by Jacksonians, most of Adams' proposals were rejected, preventing him from implementing many of his key initiatives. Additionally, Adams' personality contributed to his struggles. He was highly intellectual and held strong moral principles, but he disliked political deal-making and refused to engage in the backroom negotiations necessary to build alliances. As a result, he found himself politically isolated during his presidency. The election of 1828, defeat by Andrew Jackson. In 1828, Adams ran for re-election but faced a fierce challenge from Andrew Jackson. This time, Jackson capitalized on voter resentment over the 1824 election and mobilized widespread support. The 1828 campaign became one of the most negative in American history, filled with personal attacks against both candidates. Adams was criticized for his aristocratic background and was portrayed as being out of touch with the common people. Some even mocked his proposal for a national observatory, arguing that it was an elitist idea that had little relevance to ordinary citizens. Meanwhile, Jackson cultivated the image of a populist hero, a man of the people, which resonated strongly with voters in the West and South. In the end, Jackson won in a landslide, decisively defeating Adams in the electoral vote. This marked the first time in U.S. history that an incumbent president lost re-election to his challenger. Legacy of his presidency. Although Adams' presidency lasted only one term and many of his policies were blocked, he left behind a lasting legacy. He was one of the first presidents to advocate for an expanded role of the federal government in economic and educational development. Though unpopular at the time, these ideas later became the foundation for many policies in the 19th and 20th centuries. He remained steadfast in defending democracy and resisting the negative effects of political factionalism. Under his leadership, the U.S. maintained its global standing and preserved peaceful relations with European nations. Despite his presidential defeat, Adams did not retire from public life. Instead, he embarked on a new chapter of his career, continuing to serve the nation in a different but equally impactful role. Final years and legacy. After losing the 1828 presidential election, John Quincy Adams did not retire from politics but continued to serve the country in a different capacity. Unlike many former presidents who chose a quiet retirement, he set a unique precedent by becoming a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the first and only former president to do so. Return to the House, defender of freedom. In 1830, just 2 years after leaving the White House, Adams was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives by the people of Massachusetts. He remained in this role for 17 years until his death, marking a significant second chapter in his political career. During this time, he emerged as one of the most vocal opponents of slavery and a fierce advocate for civil liberties. Adams quickly became one of the most influential figures in Congress, particularly in debates over slavery, which was becoming an increasingly divisive issue in America. He viewed slavery as a moral stain on the nation and fought tirelessly for its abolition. This stance made him a target of Southern lawmakers who sought to preserve slavery for economic reasons. One of Adams' most notable achievements in Congress was his fight against the gag rule, which was introduced in 1836 to prohibit discussions of anti-slavery petitions in Congress. He saw this as a violation of free speech and the right to petition, both protected under the Constitution. Over the years, despite intense opposition, Adams continued to challenge the rule. In 1844, thanks to his relentless efforts, the gag rule was finally repealed, a major victory in the fight for freedom. The Amistad Case, a landmark in the fight against slavery. One of Adams's most significant contributions to the anti-slavery movement was his involvement in the famous case United States v. Amistad, 1841. The case stemmed from an incident in 1839 when a group of enslaved Africans from Sierra Leone were illegally captured and transported on the Spanish ship La Amistad. During the voyage to Cuba, they revolted, killed the captain, and tried to sail back to Africa. However, they were captured by U.S. authorities when the ship drifted into American waters. Spain demanded their return, while abolitionists argued that they were illegally enslaved and should be set free. The case reached the U.S. Supreme Court, and despite being in his 70s, Adams took on the role of defending the Africans. In a powerful speech lasting over 8 hours, he argued that these individuals were free under natural law and international law. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the captives, recognizing them as free individuals rather than property. This was a monumental victory for the abolitionist movement and one of the proudest moments in Adams' career. Final years and death. Despite his age, Adams remained active in Congress until his final days. On February 21, 1848, while delivering a speech in the House chamber, he suffered a stroke. He was taken to a nearby room inside the U.S. Capitol, where he received medical care but never recovered. 2 days later, on February 23, 1848, John Quincy Adams passed away at the age of 80. His reported last words were, "This is the last of earth. I am content." His death was deeply mourned across the nation. He was recognized as one of the greatest political minds of his era, a statesman who devoted his life to principles of democracy, justice, and human rights. His body was laid to rest in United First Parish Church in Quincy, Massachusetts, alongside his parents, former President John Adams and Abigail Adams. Legacy. John Quincy Adams left a profound impact on American history. He was a pioneer in advocating for an expanded federal government role in education, infrastructure, and economic development. His unwavering fight against slavery helped shape the abolitionist movement in the U.S. His success in the Amistad case and repeal of the gag rule reinforced fundamental American freedoms. He remains the only former U.S. president to serve in Congress after his presidency, setting a precedent for continued public service. Though often overshadowed by his father and successors, Adams' legacy as a defender of freedom, democracy, and human rights remains deeply respected today.